Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about the employment bill because he doesn't know about it. Last week, he misled the House. He was not on top of his own education bill, listening to the...
Keir Starmer was left seething as he got completely obliterated in the PMQs by Kemi Badenoch.
But, Mr. Speaker, we are driving growth on behalf of working people. Good work rights are consistent with growth, and every good business knows that. And on top of the planning reform, the building of the houses, supporting aviation...
Arrogant Starmer came back with delusional nonsense about growth only to be brutally shut down.
They are hypocrites, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about this employment bill. Part 1 of the bill means a new employee could start a job in the morning and take their employer to a tribunal that afternoon. It is no wonder that this bill has been called an adventure playground for lawyers.
Kemi Badenoch slammed Starmer for being a useless and incompetent leader as things got heated in Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister set his growth test. He said if a policy is good for growth, the answer is yes. If it's not, the answer is no. This morning, the Chancellor embraced a series of Conservative policies. Although many are welcomed, they will take years to deliver.
Starmer and his cronies are completely out of their depth and are way too arrogant to admit it.
Mr. Speaker, when Conservatives left office, we had the fastest economic growth in the G7. But what is the government doing for growth now? It's destroying it. Let's look at the employment bill. The government's own figures say it will cost business £5 billion a year. It clearly fails the Prime Minister's growth test. Will he drop it?
Britain was stable before Starmer's incompetent lot started ruining it with their tone, deaf and delusional decisions.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about the employment bill because he doesn't know about it. Last week, he misled the House. He was not on top of his own education bill, listening to
Sorry. We can't accuse the Prime Minister of misleading the House. No. But he can't do it. I'm sure there's words that you would prefer to use.
Scared Starmer keeps deflecting the questions, but Kemi Badenoch won't let him run away like a coward.
Mr. Speaker, last week he claimed to have laid down an amendment that he had not made. He doesn't know what is going on in here or out there. Last week, I spoke to a woman running a business in Exeter. She is terrified of taking on new staff. She is struggling to keep her head above water, dreading what this government will do next. She's not alone. The Federation of Small Businesses says 92% of small employers are concerned about the employment bill.
This nation's economy is crumbling and businesses are being forced to shut down by Starmer's shambolic behavior.
But, Mr. Speaker, we are driving growth on behalf of working people. Good work rights are consistent with growth, and every good business knows that. And on top of the planning reform, the building of the houses, supporting aviation, the Chancellor this morning spoke of the Oxford-Cambridge growth corridor, redeveloping Old Trafford and manufacturing at East Midlands Airport. We want to grow the economy. The only policy she's got is to shrink pensions.
Starmer is so delusional and arrogant, he still thinks that he's doing something positive for the country.
He needs to make sure that we deliver for growth now as well as the future. To grow our economy, we must get more people off sickness and welfare and into work. Clauses 8 and 9 of the unemployment bill take us in the opposite direction by increasing entitlements. His government itself estimates that these changes will increase business costs from £600 million to £1 billion a year in sick pay.
Labour's hidden agenda is fundamentally anti-growth as they're pushing useless socialism instead of productivity.
They are hypocrites, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about this employment bill. Part 1 of the bill means a new employee could start a job in the morning and take their employer to a tribunal that afternoon. It is no wonder that this bill has been called an adventure playground for lawyers. This bill is terrible for business, but it is great employment for lawyers. I know the Prime Minister loves the legal profession, but he needs to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader.
Starmer doesn't have what it takes to be a leader, and his hypocrisy is being exposed in front of the entire world.
Mr. Speaker, he does not know what his bill is doing. He should listen to business who are terrified of this bill. The only workers he cares about are lawyers, but it is not just lawyers benefiting from this bill. Who else benefits? It's not taxpayers. They will be paying for even more welfare. It's not young workers. They won't get their first break. It's definitely not businesses. They are being hammered with yet more burdens.
Make no mistake, Starmer's still in the pockets of the trade unions, and his policies are only benefiting them. Labour doesn't care about what happens to the rest of us as long as their union paymasters are satisfied. What's more concerning is that Starmer really has no idea about what's going on inside the bill that he's pushing for like a complete idiot. It's complete lunacy that Starmer's this obsessed with workers' rights and other woke plans of his, while completely ignoring the lack of efficiency and productivity that's plaguing us. Way too many people are on welfare, and at that point, it's just our taxpayer money being wasted. It's not just that either. Starmer's non-stop blunders are making things worse. Meanwhile, Trump is humiliating Starmer on how to run a government.
Donald Trump has got the Mexicans to stop other Mexicans breaking into America. Keir Starmer is less useful than a chocolate fireguard when it comes to protecting our border, though. Trump threatened tariffs on Mexico. And what happened? Well, immediately Mexico promised to station 10,000 soldiers specifically designed to stop the flow of the deadly drug fentanyl into America, as well as illegal immigrants. As a result, he's now suspended tariffs on Mexico.
Donald Trump has gotten more done within just a few days than Starmer has managed to do in 6 months. That just shows how incompetent and useless Starmer is, and on top of that, it also shows that the problems that plague our country are much easier to solve than Starmer presents them to be. At the end of the day, if Starmer wanted to bring down immigration, he would have by now. But the sad reality is that Labour's sinister agenda has always been a socialist dream of multiculturalism.
The European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I'm sure that one, I think that one can be worked out. But the European Union it's an atrocity.
There you have it. Clear as day. Trump prefers Britain to the EU. He can do better business with us than the EU. He wants to do better business with us than the EU. And actually, he's been of that view ever since the day after the Brexit vote.
Thanks to Starmer and his idiotic cabinet, Trump is starting to turn away from the UK, and that will be disastrous for us. As things stand, it's clear that Trump prefers us over the European Union. That means we can have access to exclusive trade deals and other advantages that our economy needs. Really, this can be the one miracle that ends up saving us from Rachel Reeves's nightmare budget. However, Starmer's just way too arrogant and stupid to see the immense value in this. Is it then any wonder that he's being torn apart by everyone?
So despite the fact that Starmer's cabinet called Trump things like a neo-Nazi sympathising, woman-hating, KKK-aligned fascist, and goodness knows what else, Trump is willing to overlook all of that and, by the sounds of it, treat us better than most nations. What does Starmer do? Goes to the EU with his begging bowl out, negotiating from a position of unbelievable weakness.
How insane is it that when presented with two choices, one to get closer with America and the other to go pathetically beg the EU to take us back, Starmer chooses the latter. This idiotic government doesn't seem to realise that we've been given golden opportunities, and if they fail to capitalise on them, the British public will never forgive them. Labour's already struggling to stay relevant in the polls, and the Brits absolutely despise Starmer and his cronies for ruining this country.
Yeah, it's Keir Starmer's beta Britain and Trump's alpha America. Trump isn't letting anyone push him around, and he's getting results. Tomorrow, our Prime Minister is going to metaphorically sit on Emmanuel Macron's little knee and grovel to EU officials over the result of the largest democratic vote in modern British history.
Starmer is making a fool of himself and embarrassing us all in the process. The once great nation of Britain is being reduced to beggars by this delusional and stupid government that's too blinded by socialism to see reality. Nobody respects Starmer anymore, and that's simply because he lacks the spine to stand up for Britain's national interests. On the other hand, Donald Trump is schooling Starmer on how to win over the people.
Yeah, I mean, why we would expect Starmer to be like him is beyond me. You know, the man is gutless. He has no courage. You know, he's got jelly where his spine should be, and he's never going to do anything like this. And let's not forget, in terms of, you know, Starmer's done this to prevent, you know, immigration as well. And just, we have a guy who said, not couple of years ago? He said our immigration laws were racist. This is a man who doesn't want to tackle immigration. It's the biggest single issue that affects the people of this country, and he's putting his head in the sand, and he doesn't want to deal with it, and he can't.
Starmer's not fit for the job, not now, not ever. He lacks the integrity, charisma, and frankly, the brains to run a nation. The fact that he managed to create this huge of a mess in just 6 months is proof of that. This is not what a leader behaves like, and the British public is starting to see that. Starmer's approval ratings are in the gutter, and he's been dubbed the worst Prime Minister in recent history. Good job, Sir Keir.
Typical. That's what people hate in this country. We've got Calamity Keir, who wants to go away cap in hand and beg the French to help us, and Donald Trump saying to the Mexicans they've got a very similar problem. How many people? Exactly. Hundreds came over last week on small boats. It's got a very similar problem in Mexico, obviously on a much bigger scale. It's a much bigger country. And he just says, if you don't help us sort this out, we're going to whack you. We're going to whack you with tariffs. We're going to shut your economy down.
What could we do to the French economy?
The illegal immigration problem that both America and the UK are facing is more similar than you think. Yet why is it that Trump has been able to solve it, but Starmer is being smashed by the gangs? It all boils down to political will. Starmer is a woke lefty and absolutely loves the idea of immigration. He never really wanted to solve the problem and only told us a bunch of lies to win support. This dishonest behaviour doesn't just end there, he's been trying to sell us all out with Brexit as well.
What the hell are this Labour government doing? Why would you repeal rules which mean that people arriving here illegally via small boat have to submit to a scientific age check, otherwise face being treated as an adult? So basically, a man, and let's face it, it is mainly men who have arrived here by small boat, can say that he is 13 even though he may be 30, and then be placed in a school with young teenage girls in this country. You're having a laugh.
Keir Starmer presents himself as a leader of conviction, but from the very start, his rhetoric is riddled with empty platitudes and vague promises. He speaks as if he stands for working-class Brits, yet his policies and actions suggest otherwise. There's a clear disconnect between the image he wants to project and the reality of his leadership. Ask yourself, why is this idiot trying to remove each and every rule that serves as a deterrent against illegal immigration? The answer is simple, it's because he doesn't want to deter immigration. If anything, he thoroughly loves it more than he cares for this nation.
The way to make it work is to smash the gangs that are running the vile trade.
Not much of that happening, is there? And how will this latest move smash them? It'll only encourage them. I'm sorry, but I just don't get it. This was part of the legislation, the Illegal Migration Act, introduced by the Tories for good reason, and one of the very only things that they actually got done, which also meant that people who arrived here in this country illegally via dinghy could almost never become UK citizens.
As he continues, it becomes painfully obvious that his approach is to dance around real issues rather than confront them head-on. He claims to stand for law and order, yet under his leadership, Labour has softened its stance on crime, prioritising ideological nonsense over the safety of British citizens. Crime rates continue to climb, yet Starmer's Labour seems more interested in handing out British nationality to illegal immigrants. Instead of enforcing the law with strength and decisiveness, he panders to activist groups while ordinary Britons bear the consequences of weak policies.
Having the power to clarify someone's age and making it nigh on impossible for them to become a citizen of this country if they enter it illegally via dinghy is effectively a deterrent. Why would you remove that? It makes no sense. In the first half of last year, more than 1,300 migrants were caught pretending to be minors.
This trend of weakness has completely shut down national security. Starmer and his cronies have no plans on controlling illegal immigration. Labour under Starmer is more concerned with keeping open borders and avoiding confrontation with the EU than protecting British sovereignty. The same party that claimed to fight for working-class citizens now prioritises mass migration policies. Starmer's way too arrogant to accept the consequences, and it proves he's more interested in appeasing the woke elites than standing up for his own country.
The previous government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. This is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident.
Yet he's running an open borders experiment of his own. More unwanted lunacy from the Labour government. What on earth is next? back into the EU?
Let's get this straight. Starmer had the audacity to blame the Tories for running an open borders experiment, and yet he's doing the same? It's insane that Starmer doesn't realise the hypocrisy in his own actions, but the British public isn't as stupid as Starmer and his cronies think. It's disgusting that Starmer thinks he can get away with gaslighting and manipulating the public with his shameless lies and dishonest excuses.
They're innocent victims in this.
Yeah, but nobody's arguing that some people are trafficked, people are smuggled. The argument is that they are planning to remove the ability to check someone's age. Now, I'm just wondering why, and I'm seeing it whether you think that is a wise move for a government.
I do think we need ways to check people's age.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure the way we've been doing it in the past has been effective or fair.
Labour supporters are just as delusional as Starmer is. If anything, they feed into his arrogance by their blind support. Nobody has a problem with helping the innocent victims, but everyone should have a problem with dishonesty. Just think of the consequences and dangers of putting grown men, claiming to be minors, in the same spaces as actual minors. If the grooming gang scandal is anything to go by, that is a horrible decision, but Starmer is too blind to see that.
And then we had lovely pictures from Rwanda showing us what a lovely place it was. So how is it a deterrent to send someone to another country where they're going to be treated really well?
Well, it's a deterrent.
The Labour government
Is that a rhetorical question? It's a deterrent because they wanted to come to the UK and they've ended up somewhere else. So that's the deterrent. And the idea of the deterrent is, and people often criticise, say, well, there wasn't enough space there anyway. Well, once people realise you're serious, I can bet your bottom dollar that most people will stop coming over via small boat.
Ultimately, Starmer's leadership is the prime example of political cowardice. This is what Starmerism is. He offers no real solutions, just more of the same recycled Labour failures and false promises. His inability to take a firm stance on crime, the economy, immigration, and foreign affairs exposes him as a politician more concerned with optics than results. Britain needs leadership that is bold, clear-headed, and willing to put the interests of its own people first. Starmer, with all his indecisiveness and weak rhetoric, is simply not up to the task.
We've got the issue of Donald Trump, the issue of tariffs, all of that going on. We've got this tariffs on Mexico, on Canada, and on China from the US, and they're threatening against the EU. But, if we play nicey-nicey with Donald Trump, we might escape them. Wouldn't that be worth it, rather than cozying up to, Germany and Olaf Scholz, by the way, who is leading a country that's entering its third year in recession and is about to lose office in a few weeks' time. It is utter madness.
The UK is caught between a lot of things at the moment, and our future hangs in the balance. One wrong step could completely leave us in ruins for years to come. The good news is that there's a very clear way out of this that results in us securing a win, but the bad news is that Keir Starmer and his idiots are in charge of making that decision. The public is left wondering if we can trust them anymore to decide what is actually the best for us and not some ideological lunacy.
I'm incandescent. But not with Macron and the other EU leaders. They're waste of space. They are the past, not the future, most of these people. But Keir Starmer, cozying up to them, we know what he wants to do.
Yeah, I never doubted, not for a second, that Keir Starmer was going to sell us out, that he was going to betray Brexit, that he was going to break each and every one of his promises on this topic. But I never imagined in my wildest dreams he would do it so quickly.
The European Union is a complete joke at this point compared to America and other countries around the world. Why is Starmer so obsessed with chaining us back to them? Literally every single country in the European Union is either irrelevant or struggling. On top of that, all their leaders are completely useless and incompetent, so maybe that's why Starmer wants to cozy up to them. He must feel at home with the other idiotic leaders. What Labour is doing right now is a complete betrayal of the British public, and Kemi Badenoch is right to rip into Starmer for it.
We know already from the newspapers, he's told us exactly what he's going to do. Starting with the fishermen. All of our fish in the North Sea, the first thing that's on the table is you, British fishermen, who go out and do an incredibly dangerous job to put food on our table, who have been done over in the worst possible way for decades by the EU, and were one of these real people that really thought finally they were going to get some justice out of Brexit.
We're going to get back our fishing rights in our waters.
The consequences of this are far worse than you can ever imagine. It's not just the fact that America will slap us with insane tariffs, there's other things at stake too. Cozying up to Europe means that we'll have to lose our fishing rights as well, and that will completely clobber the local fishing industry. The prices will go up and life will be much more expensive for the hard-working fishermen. After making things miserable for the farmers, Starmer is now going against the fishing community, and this won't end well for him. Does that mean we should abandon the EU altogether?
Of course we should work with EU leaders. We should work with, as we do under AUKUS, with, Canada and New Zealand and Australia and America in our security. We have, the Five Eyes, we work very closely. However, when we saw Russia invading Ukraine, it was the EU, it was Germany in particular, who dragged their feet over actually helping Ukraine. We went ahead and we in America went in and helped Ukraine. Now, I don't want to be tied to them. Where was the EU when Falklands were invaded by Argentina? Nowhere to be seen. I do not want to be tied.
We can have the best of both worlds in this situation. We can have an excellent relationship with America while maintaining close ties with the European Union. The only difference is that we should do it from a place of strength and on our own terms instead of bending the knee to them or picking one over the other. Right now, the EU is scamming us with horrible trade deals, and unless Starmer realizes that, it's over for him and the Labour Party.
Europe is going to be a smaller and smaller population. It's going to be smaller and smaller economies. They are not growing. Even the ones that are growing by a tiny amount. And we've got all these other countries around the world, that, especially in Asia and in America, that are booming. And they are ready to go. We need to be focusing our strengths where the money is, don't we?
Sure, maintaining close ties with Europe is a good idea, but it isn't the only relation we should be building. There are many more countries that are more beneficial for us. European countries are not what they used to be anymore. Even the major ones like Germany are stagnating in terms of growth, and let's face it, there's not much to gain from a union of struggling countries led by liberal nonsense. People are starting to realize the madness behind it all.
I mean, properly mad stuff that, by the way, anti-growth.
Yeah, and actually, look, it is mad stuff, and actually, finally, for the first time after 30 years, people are increasingly waking up to just how mad that is. And not just here in this country, right across Europe. And that's the curious thing about Keir Starmer, about Olaf Scholz, about Emmanuel Macron. They are yesterday's men.
This woke virus that has completely destroyed our nation has been running free for way too long. People are starting to see the reality behind it all, and they're mad. The fuming Brits are mounting a furious backlash against Labour's buffoons, and Kemi Badenoch is leading the charge. Not only is she shredding Starmer in the PMQs, she's completely exposing him to be a hypocritical fraud who's way out of his depth. The people are waking up and raising their voice. You can join them by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.